Jeffrey Hill sits down with us to discuss Satshow DC, the comms ecosystem, and his expectations for the industry moving forward. Simultaneously, Illyria's Series B of $100 million at a $1.3 billion valuation headlines the almost $150 million of capital entering the conversation this week, as they further develop their network orchestration platform and optical terminals.
Yeah, Vulcan rockets have been officially suspended from national security launches for the time being. We read that as the rest of 2026. Residents of the DoD doghouse include Boeing and Lockheed, whose ULA Vulcan rockets are on ice, and Northrop, whose Vulcan solid boosters burned through on the previous 2 launches. For good measure, this comes on the back of Boeing's Starliner and SLS challenges, figuratively putting them on double secret probation.
Sophia Space's lucrative seed raise of $10 million indicates an effort by private capital to prioritize orbital compute and data centers. With other players in the space, it will be interesting to see how Sophia's choice in business model and technological differentiation stack up.
Welcome to this week's episode of Space Times Podcast. As always, I'm Harrison Lambert,
here with Paul Mayer.
Excited to share this week's space industry updates with you. We hope you enjoy the episode. Subscribe to our newsletter if you want the written breakdown of our episodes emailed to your inbox every Monday morning. Drop us a comment on our LinkedIn or Blue Sky with anything you enjoyed or would like to see. And as always, listen weekly on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're receiving this signal.
Some extra exciting news for us is that we will be in person at Satshow DC providing media coverage from March 22nd through March 26th. Satshow is a conference combining this satellite event with GovMill Space to provide a gathering of industry and thought leadership around the space industry with a general focus on defense interests. As mentioned at the opening, we had the pleasure of interviewing Conference Chair Jeffrey Hill to provide an in-depth perspective on why you should join us in DC later this month. Please reach out to us if you're interested in meeting at the event, as we'd love to see you in person. To start off this week, we'll be hearing from our interview with Chairman Jeffrey Hill before jumping into communications and the rest of our regular programming.
Jeff Hill, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Harrison. Thank you, Paul, for having me.
So to start off, let's start big picture, kind of give us the overview. What is Satshow? Who attends this conference? Why is the conference important compared to other space conferences?
We cover everything involving satellites, every application, every market, and including adjacent space markets. Like, for example, we also cover the launch industry because it's directly tied to the satellite industry, as well as some of the commercial space markets, and also government and military applications. And we also have a tech seminar, which covers technology, space and satellite technology research. Today, so we're at about 15,000 attendees from all over the world. The conference is 4 days in March, from the 23rd to the 26th. And it's a global satellite technology show. It's one of the largest in the world, and the only one hosted in DC. So
I'd love to get a better understanding of sort of, what are some of the patterns that you've seen in your time with Satshow with satellite?
Trends that you're seeing this year are further integration between cellular and satellite technologies, where, commercial cell phones, the ones that you get, your iPhone, your Samsung Galaxy, are becoming much more integrated with satellite networks, where, everybody is using satellite for different applications other than just GPS, right? And then in some cases, we have direct to cellular connectivity from satellite direct to cell. That's a big topic, big talking point, because it's a very clear business case. Like, it's not a long-term business case. This is generating revenue now. So that's one trend on the connectivity side. On the industry, like the supply chain itself, I mean, there was a trend that was everything was going to be small sats. That's not really so much the case anymore. I mean, there's some satellites, and most satellites are getting bigger. Constellations are definitely getting bigger, and other trends that you're seeing are there's a lot of merger and acquisition activity to build multi-orbit satellite systems. So you're seeing like companies that have a strong low Earth orbit portfolio merge with somebody who has a geostationary or even MEO orbit assets. And you're seeing them create these sort of large multi-orbit networks that can seamlessly work with each other. On the government side, the government has a tremendous budget. Like they've got a lot of money to spend. And so right now, government end users are trying to see, like, now is the time they've got the budget to fulfill some of their long-term missions. And you're going to see, what is next generation military SATCOM. I know people throw around the concept of Golden Dome. It's more than just that. It's having like a robust and resilient global military satellite network for the United States, its allies, and global operations. So, I mean, the trend there is that there's a huge budget and lots of capabilities out there. I've tried to bring those markets to satellite. We have a very large exhibit hall, and our exhibit hall is like a supply chain of creating, building, and launching satellites. So it's very it makes a lot of sense. But then I'm also bringing these other end users, other communities to the show so that we can kind of learn from each other. So one of the things I really enjoy working on our show is that it gives people in our industry a chance to sort of lead those discussions as to like where everyone is going together, where all these new partners are going together in their long-term missions. So, the conference program is largely community built, and that's through a lot of different processes. The first is we open up a call for proposals and papers for the entire conference, and this happens around June. We have all different types of those programs too. So there's people that submit for our technical program, which is peer evaluated by an advisory board, so that we get a balance of relevant technologies and also technologies that are at critical stages. So we have our tech seminar program that every presentation is based on research that has been peer evaluated. And then we try to get a diverse range of technologies. And then we also try to make sure that the presentations themselves are discussing key milestones or key developments in those technologies. And then on the business program side, we have not only that call for proposals, which is evaluated by myself, my team, and also our partners. We have partner organizations from a wide range of space and satellite nonprofits that develop programs with us, like the Satellite Industry Association, GSOA, as well as we have a finance forum that's put together by partners that we have at analysis firms like Analysis Mason, Nova Space. We also have a startup space competition, which we bring in applications through that, and those entries are judged by myself and our startup space judges and our co-director Rafferty Jackson, as well as our industry partners on that JSAT. So that process is very complicated, involves a lot of different people and collaboration, but it's not just me filling in a box and saying this is what this is, because I don't know. Like I was on another podcast recently and I said, I don't know the answers to the industry. Like my job is to learn myself. Like if my conference isn't educating me, then it's not very useful. So we try to have the community build the program so that they can ask the questions and also solve the problems they want to solve. It takes up a large chunk of my year. It's a very hard and difficult, but also rewarding process because I learn throughout it. And then when I go to my show, I'm excited to hear these presentations and learn and be able to take that knowledge and start building next year's program so that we have conversations that continue.
let's kind of bring it back to the conference. What are you most excited about this year?
I'm going to say this just because I just got off of our prep call for the tech seminar. I'm really excited about the tech seminar program. Over the next few years, I want satellite to become more of a place where people trade technical information and share and collaboratively solve those technical problems by sharing research. I don't want to just I think giving a space for somebody to put up a poster is great, but I think giving them a stage and 100 and some people to talk to for 25 minutes and to show their research like a classroom is extremely valuable. I think it's just as valuable as a panel of executive leaders, because these kinds of collaborations are really what's going to get technology moving. I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about our GovMil Space program this year because last year with the administrative change and some confusion about whether or not government employees could attend conferences, that's been cleared up, and I'm excited to see them come back to the show this year. I know that was a weird transition year, but I'm really excited to see how we're way ahead of it in attendance on the government military side compared to last year. So I'm really excited to see them. We have some really, really great keynotes. I'm looking forward to hosting Taylor Jordan, who's the new director at the Office of Space Commerce. I'm really looking forward to seeing what SDA has to say. I'm looking for. We just confirmed Bridget Mendler,
Northwood.
Northwood, who's going to be our closing keynote. We've got our. I'm looking forward to. We've got our 10th anniversary of our startup space competition. We've put more than 120 startups through this entrepreneur pitch contest, where some of our first competitors in this contest are now market leaders, like Orbit Fab and Leo Labs and Astroscale. These are all companies that applied to participate in this competition, this Shark Tank thing that we've been doing for 10 years now. And this is our 10th anniversary, and a lot of people who have participated in that competition are coming back to see it. So I'm excited to see all of them again as well. There's a lot going on, and we're within a few weeks now, so I'm getting close.
Jeff, again, thank you for your time. Close us out with what you need. How can we or our audience members do the most to help you, to help Satshow, to help out everything that you're working on these days?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I was given a code to give to your listeners. If you want to register for the satellite show, you can get a discount on it. So our website is satshow.com, satshow.com. And there's a code that you can use to register. It is space 012. So lowercase letters, space 012. If you use that code, you can get a discount on registration. And, we have, if you want to just come see the exhibit hall, it's a 90,000 square foot exhibit hall. It's huge. We would love to see you there. If you're in the engineering tech field, like I said, we have this special program for you on our tech seminar. Got something for everybody there. Visit the website, check it out, and come join us. And we hope to see you there.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait. Hope to see you there, Jeff. And again, thank you so much for joining us for this interview.
Thank you so much, Harrison. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Good talking to you guys.
Pleasure to meet you, Jeff. Thank you again so much for joining the show. Thank you again to Jeffrey Hill for the conversation and interview. Our major topics this week are communications, AI, propulsion, and then the standard business moves and tech advances. And we're going to start off immediately with communications, not burying the lead in any capacity here. Illyria, $1.3 billion valuation, $100 million Series B, led by both Battery Ventures and J2 Ventures. This makes for, I think, the third or fourth unicorn valuation that we've seen in the last 6 months since we've started doing the podcast. So there are some massive liquidation events coming down the pipe this year, if not next.
Yeah, I think that's like ISI and K2 Space. I can't think of the other couple, but Lyria definitely playing in a hot market right now. And I think the funding reflects that. They have a really great technology. They spun out of Google to develop optical communication terminals. So, like I said, real hot topic right now. We've been talking about all the drama with Mynaric. There were all the acquisitions last year of other optical communication providers. There was mesh optical technologies coming out of Stealth last week with a huge $50 million fundraising. So just a lot of money being poured into this technology as it's become a critical component to missile defense primarily, but just general telecommunications, constellations, and space architecture. The $100 million they raised, I'm sure will help them in developing their technology for the Space RANS consortium that we announced a couple months ago. They joined it with Airbus and some other European space players, but it's a large 5G NTN radio access network intelligent controller program that Europe is funding in order to develop their own communications capabilities, which will be key to their telecommunications constellations that they're standing up.
Additionally, AST Space Mobile was awarded a $30 million prime contract by the U.S. Space Development Agency for prototype TACSATCOM in the Halo Europa program. This is to develop the TACSATCOM using commercial space vehicles for future tranches of the proliferated warfighter space architecture. Their demo is scheduled to be no later than December 2027, though there may be some slippage there outside of their control. We'll just have to wait and see. But this is a pretty big award and a pretty big contract and a very clear signal from defense spending as to what the priorities are here.
Yeah, military communication networks have been really big, even beyond the PWSA. Star Shield is kind of the big player there, so it's nice to see another company kind of competing in that area. I know when AST launched their Bluebird 6 constellation back in December, we talked about how a lot of these other companies playing in and Starlink's kind of neck of the woods will have to carve out their own niche to compete. And defense applications for communications constellation is a huge niche. I think the 30 million really reinforces that point. They were competing against 19 other companies in what's called the Halo pool. So those are companies that are allowed to win the contract. They're basically pre-approved. But AST coming out on top is really an endorsement of their capability, especially following the deployment of Bluebird 6 and the soon planned deployment of Bluebird 7. I think it's a great feather in their cap.
Speaking of Starlink, we've also got a couple of big Starlink updates here. So Kyivstar hits 3 million subscribers for its Starlink direct-to-cell offering, also doing a great job from deploying direct-to-cell and direct-to-device capabilities in Kyiv. 1.2 million SMS messages have been sent, and this has enabled access for iPhones running on iOS 26.2 or later. And simultaneously, Virgin Media O2 launches Starlink direct to smartphone devices. So this is the first European country to enable a direct-to-cell mobile data plan, and the launch supports WhatsApp, Messenger, and Google Maps.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting distinction they're making, claiming to be the first. As you noted, Kyivstar is deployed across Ukraine, mostly southern and western Ukraine. So it's a lot of the news that we were seeing out of Ukraine during their conflict with Russia. Starlink proved to be very capable for war-torn areas where ground infrastructure couldn't support communication. So 1.2 million SMS messages is a huge amount of data to be sending around, but as Virgin Media points out, it's just SMS. So actually getting full bandwidth mobile data through is a bit bigger of a challenge, and that's why O2 is rolling out in a really slow kind of way. It's a small portion of the UK, and it's only for certain applications currently. So it includes things like WhatsApp, Messenger, and Google Maps. But they're expecting to expand that to eventually all applications, but they're kind of slowly rolling out new ones that can use this service.
Additionally, the European Investment Bank extended a 25 million euro, roughly 30 million US, venture debt financing to Luxembourg-based direct-to-device satellite operator OQ Technology. OQ Technology will use the money to develop and launch 20 or more satellites in the next 2 years. These are SDR-S and C-band for IoT and smartphones using 3GPP, NB-IoT, and 5G NR platforms.
Yeah, so this is a company that's been around for a little while. They've done some work before with their satellites, but this is a big investment, and it's interesting that it's debt financing, so it's non-dilutive in that way, and seems to be just to operate and deploy something to make that money back. Their software-defined radios, their software-defined satellites allow them to operate in S-band and C-band, which are pretty popular. So that allows them to use it for Internet of Things and smartphones. And just breaking down some of those acronyms, 3GPP is the 3G and 5G NRs, 5G, so typical cell protocols, but adding that narrowband Internet of Things protocol as well allows them to do some other interesting applications that we've seen in the IoT space, such as asset tracking and industry applications. So they can have some more B2B applications, which again, going back to the carving out a niche, like this would be good for direct to device. And I see some space sovereignty indicators here in that aspect, but also being able to play in that business to business aspect gives them an extra layer of separation from some of the bigger players.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about sort of venture debt is that it's venture debt has basically the highest cost of capital. So the interest rate on venture scale debt is going to be astronomical. And so it's interesting to see OQ Technologies, who's a publicly traded company, taking on specifically venture debt, though it's more likely that they're just taking on a debt non-dilutive form of capital in order to execute on this. But all the same, OQ Technologies is a unique company that has some very unique capabilities, like you were discussing. And so it's interesting to see them take on venture debt rather than an equity raise, depending on sort of where they stand in the ecosystem. They're a company that, candidly, I'm not too familiar with, but them being publicly traded is interesting that they would be pursuing venture debt specifically. Sky unveils SkyCell Stratospheric. It is a 60,000-foot space-to-ground cell antenna and covers the area equivalent of roughly 500 towers for weeks or months at a time. It's planned to fly this summer, and it looks like they're developing more or less a fairly persistent, effectively floating cell tower that at that altitude is able to really project and bounce the signal much more effectively. Typically, when sending signals really far, you're limited by the fact that the signal is bouncing off of the atmosphere and reflecting back down to Earth. And so that's sort of the limiting factor for how signals tend to get transmitted over radio or terrestrially. And so their ability to broaden that aperture is really impressive.
Yeah, it's a interesting application. We've talked about high altitude platforms. They were kind of having a moment a couple months ago. I think Sky came up then too, but this is more of an announcement of their technology. There's certainly some benefits to this. There's projects like Loon that came out of Google that pursued this application, but they shuttered a while ago. So it'll be interesting to see how successful this is, given that something as well funded as a Google project couldn't really make it work. But the way they're positioning it seems like it's more of a deployable kind of system in areas where ground infrastructure don't exist. So usually we hear, disaster relief applications, some military applications. I could certainly see this being beneficial for either. It covers a large area, and it serves as kind of a relay between space and ground systems. So it should boost the signal in both cases and add some extra capability to either of those systems on their own.
Finally, for the communication section, French ground station as a service startup Skinnapy won a €500,000 award from the French government to integrate a ground antenna owned and operated by the Kenya Space Agency into its commercial network. So the Kenyan Space Agency operates a 4.5 meter S and X band antenna out of Nairobi. And this continues the trend that we've seen for a good little while of ground stations and ground station infrastructure being an underappreciated layer of infrastructure necessary for the continued expansion in space.
Yeah, they keep coming up with, like last month, they kept coming up with Washington Harbor investing in a bunch of ground station technology. I know Northwood's one of the big players in this, and they're basically identifying a huge problem with the scale up of space as an industry, is that the pipelines to get data to Earth just can't keep up. And so there's a lot of people playing in this space. Skype has a pretty unique approach to this, which is that they don't really they don't really build and operate their own antennas. They more aggregate a bunch of antennas to have them all operate on a shared network. So, the end user doesn't really have to care which antenna they're connecting to. It's all just one interface. This is the first African antenna they added. They've got less than 20, but most of them were gathered through AWS partnerships, which they themselves operate their own network of satellites. I believe it's called Atlas. This is an interesting expansion into Africa. It's a nice signal that Europe is trying to support their space efforts. Kenya has one satellite called Taifa 1, and that's what this antenna was built for. But there are plans to build a spaceport in Kenya as sort of one of the main launch sites for the African Space Agency, which is being built up across multiple nations. I believe Egypt is the center for the space agency of Africa. So great signals for Africa and building up their capability. It's one of the countries that's, we keep talking about different countries kind of standing up their own space capabilities, and Africa is definitely in the mix there, but they're one of the up and coming regions, I would say.
Moving on to AI, Sophia Space has announced the close of a $10 million seed round led by Alpha Funds, KDDI Green Partners Fund, and Unlock Venture Partners to accelerate development of the company's next generation orbital computing systems and proprietary thermal technology. So having spoken with Sophia Space previously, effectively what they have been working on are flat sat computational data centers, where one side of the satellite is a solar cell and a power solution. The middle of the satellite itself is the computer and processing center, and the back end of the satellite, the other end in shadow, is the radiation and thermal solution, helping to keep everything cool. So it's designed to be largely, if not fully, passive, and represents a series of very difficult technical challenges being solved. We've seen other players focus on orbital data centers or lunar-based data centers, focusing more on the data storage and data transfer side of things, rather than the much more power intensive and heat intensive compute layer of things. So really interesting and exciting to see Sophia Space getting involved and getting the funding that they need in order to make some meaningful waves here.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach across the players. I haven't seen anybody else kind of taking this approach. I'm curious to see if it pays off, because as you mentioned, it's kind of a sandwich design where they put Jetson and Blackwell processors behind a solar panel and then have a radiator on the back. That one of the key aspects of this is that they can scale it out by just patching them together. Then they effectively serve as satellite solar panels, but then also their compute and thermal radiation. It's part of the technology is being able to move the compute around to each tile depending on where it's generating the most heat and being able to dump that heat. So there's definitely some thought being put into not overloading the electronics, but I find it an odd approach because, solar panels are one of the areas where you generate the most heat, because the electrical generation is not perfect and the rest just gets transferred into heat. So focusing heat generation from the sun as well as heat generation from the processor in one location doesn't seem like the best move, but, backing it with their thermal radiators, is a good move. So overall, it's just, I want to see if the balance kind of works out there. So certainly an interesting approach. I'm glad they got the funding to kind of see how it plays out. And I do like the scaling aspect of it. So that'll be really neat, and kind of what applications it enables, because it could fly on any satellite. It's pretty modular in that way.
Additionally, Cesium Astro acquired Vidrover, to embed AI in communication systems for real-time multimodal signal analysis.
Yeah, this is a big area as well. It's playing in the ISR sector of the space industry. So intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, just getting more data out of the signals that are collected. I know a lot of the stuff we've been talking about recently has been AI with respect to imaging and how you can kind of reduce the amount of data generated there and downlink insights rather than raw data and save on that kind of downlink cost. But a lot of those same problems exist for radio frequency as well. It generates a lot of data. If you're collecting signals from everywhere, you want to know, what signals are valuable, what they're indicating, and really enables some real-time capabilities on orbit in terms of, you can scan large areas, find where a signal is coming from, then focus in on that area. That has real, defense applications, which, given Cesium Astro raising was like 500 million recently.
It was big, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of money off of the Export-Import Bank, kind of on the back of focusing on defense applications. I expect this is going to be a huge boon for them when pursuing some of those contracts, because they don't yet have anything in like PWSA or any sort of SATCOM contracts like AST does. But with that much money and kind of consolidating this kind of capability under their umbrella, I think they're a real player to take on some of these defense contracts. And I think they're going to get a lot of interest from the US military in terms of implementing not just their radios, but what they're pursuing is their own communications constellation. So I'd expect to see them become a big player in military communications constellations pretty soon.
Absolutely. And just to elaborate, so the raise from earlier this month was a $470 million Series C. So this is not going to be the only acquisition that we can expect Cesium Astro to make. Seeker and Wyvern have partnered together to launch Seeker Geo, which is an AI-driven hyperspectral reasoning engine targeting the growing gap between raw satellite data and usable intelligence. This effectively looks to solve a couple of different problems that currently sit in aggregate, effectively bottlenecking the industry. And that is the bandwidth challenge, the sheer amount of data that needs to be transmitted, the ability to actually transmit that data to reliable ground stations or through optical laser terminal to have a more persistent form of transmission. And this is something that we've spoken about somewhat extensively, how that downlink challenge gets solved, how you're able to get quick, actionable intelligence in near real time, rather than having a 72-hour turnaround to a 72-minute turnaround. And what they're doing is effectively layering in their AI-driven intelligence engine, their intelligence models on top of the hyperspectral raw data that's collected. So we've seen this model more or less play out. We haven't seen it extensively in the hyperspectral space, and we're sort of seeing that develop in real time.
That's actually what I work on at Loft. We have hyperspectral cameras where I deploy customers that do AI applications. So I know Loft announced last week their partnership with SmartSat using some data. They're planning to use some hyperspectral data to apply their AI algorithm to. So this is a trend that's been playing out in other places in the industry. And Wyvern does fly payloads on Loft Orbital. So they've got some space heritage for their cameras. Applying this sort of AI technology from Seeker should only help to serve them as they deploy their own constellation of imagers to create more value out of what they're collecting.
One of the interesting aspects of this is that Wyvern's partnership with Seeker comes almost simultaneously with some backing from the new Canada-focused venture arm from Nordspace. So Nordspace is a Canadian orbital transportation, launch, and satellite company, and so they do everything, though they haven't done anything yet. They haven't yet launched anything, but they've also stood up a corporate venture arm themselves internally and are backing Wyvern in this effort. So there's clearly a lot of excitement and a lot of momentum here, both from the commercial side and from the Canadian government. to help Wyvern get their feet under them, achieve scale, and really hit the ground running. Finally, from the AI section, Boeing Space Mission Systems AI Lab Director announced in recent ground tests that Boeing engineers had demonstrated a large language model running on commercial off-the-shelf hardware could examine telemetry and report in natural language on the health of the satellite. There have been a lot of different companies that I've spoken to and worked with over the past several years that are specifically focusing on collecting, processing, and analyzing telemetry data to provide as much real-time intelligence to their operators as possible. The fact that Boeing has decided to just cut the middleman out and incorporate this capability in-house indicates that this is very much a needed problem, and that there's likely to be a lot of other suitors for this industry rather than just Boeing themselves. So the fact that Boeing, one of the biggest incumbents in the space, has decided to solve this problem themselves very much validates the problem itself. Like, oh, this is a huge problem. Everybody's trying to solve it. So this is a huge boon for everybody playing in that space, despite the fact that Boeing is more than likely not likely to be a potential customer anymore.
Yeah, it's a cool application. It's interesting that you've heard it elsewhere, because I haven't seen anybody deploy AI in this kind of capability for satellite monitoring. I think a lot of the concern would just be around automated activity on the spacecraft and that kind of monitoring that it could do. But as we see more like RPO tech applications and kind of satellite capabilities where they do have to be autonomous in their operations, I think that's going to be less of a hurdle to overcome. So applications like this can make a lot more sense, especially when you're scaling to like the thousands or even millions of satellites. You're going to need something on this level of autonomy in terms of monitoring a spacecraft in order to not just keep the problem manageable, but just for the safety of constellations and space in general. So on the propulsion side of things, we have some more drama coming out of the rocket launch sector of the industry. Off the news of the Vulcan burn through on their solid booster, they have once again gone back to investigative mode. They were stuck in that state for pretty much the past year when the same problem happened on the Vulcan launch early in 2025. So their return to flight, they hoped they had fixed the problem, but the same problem cropped up again. And now Space Force is pausing their national security launches on Vulcan. This is a huge hit to ULA, as they I think all but two of their contracts are to launch national security missions. So early in the year, before this Vulcan launch happened, the new CEO of ULA, who replaced Tory Bruno, announced that they were planning to do all 20 of their national security launches this year. This will make that impossible, and it's going to be interesting to see if they get any of those off the pad, given how long it took them to investigate last time, and the fact that their investigation didn't fix the problem means that it's likely that we're going to see something on the same order of magnitude for a pause on Vulcan. So, and even when they get back to launch, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't launch a satellite. They go back to launching concrete mass dummies out of fear for being caught on another failure. Even though they claim that the last launch successfully deployed the national security payload. So not great for ULA, not great for Northrop Grumman, who built the solid boosters. And we'll have to see how this plays out for that rocket.
It's a pretty big setback for everybody involved with the effort. And
not Blue Origin.
Well,
not Blue Origin with Tory Bruno now, and the best operating part of the Vulcan is their B4 engine. So they're probably a little happy about this.
I mean, it seems like Blue Origin definitely is the one party to sort of come out the other side of this clean. A little bit like Andy Dufresne, but they came out the other side of the pipe. It looks like pretty clean from all of this.
See, I was thinking like when Belichick and Brady left the Patriots, and they're like, who is the real value here? Tory Bruno leaving for Blue Origin's like, yeah, just try and use Vulcan without me.
Seems fair.
On the civil side of the government, there are also shakeups in the launch plans. NASA has revised their plan for future Artemis missions. This is following the mishaps from last month, hydrogen leak on the first stage that caused a month-long delay in their launch, and now a helium leak in their upper stage that's caused them to roll back to the vehicle assembly building and push their next launch window out to early April. And if they can't fix it by then, late April. So they are trying to move full steam ahead, but these problems are not making it easy. Isaac Min has announced recently that the helium leaks on the upper stage are likely due to a valve on the quick release mechanism, but he didn't rule out a check valve, which is unfortunate given that was the issue that popped up on Artemis 1 when that launched. So again, if they didn't find the root cause problem and it's popping up again, this is not a great look for Boeing, who also operates ULA jointly with Lockheed with the Vulcan rocket. So their investigative procedures might need another looking at, some investigation into their investigation. There is other shakeups to the SLS program. They've changed the plan for Artemis 3 from landing astronauts on the moon to now landing lunar rovers on the moon, which is both a setback to manned return to the moon, but they're claiming that it's to refocus their efforts on their lunar rovers. They've also scrapped any plans at a block upgrade to SLS. So they had a block 1B upgrade planned for following Artemis 2, but now with all these adjustments, they're going to stick with the block 1 for the foreseeable future. They're going to increase their launch cadence to 1 SLS launch per year, which I don't know why they announced these things when they're having setbacks like this. It feels a lot like Vulcan saying they're going to do 20 launches a year before they can't even get one off in a year.
A little bit.
So we'll see how this plays out. It's not great given the recent advances out of China with their Long March 10A success and their Mengyan capsule success. It looks like China's moving full steam ahead to getting people on the moon, and their Chang'e rovers work great. So even their U.S. is playing sort of catch up, and hopefully we can. It seems that they're refocusing their efforts on SLS, and hopefully that helps push it along.
Yeah, this is a pretty disappointing series of setbacks from both the Space Force and NASA. It's a sizable net loss for American space advancement.
Yeah, it makes it a little harder for them to give SpaceX grief for not making their timelines on Starship. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is one of the drawbacks of cutting funding to these space programs, cutting funding to NASA, is that the engineering talent that's been able to ensure and assure the quality of these projects and delivery on time to the level of safety and satisfaction that we need. Once funding gets cut and NASA sees personnel cuts, that quality just dips. And this is unfortunately one of the predictable consequences for some of the appropriations and spending that we've seen over the past several years when it comes to NASA's budget.
Phantom Space this week acquired Vector and all of its remaining assets. The claim is that this will significantly reduce Phantom's expected CapEx requirements for their Daytona rocket. Vector is a space company that went bankrupt back in 2019. And their founder, Jim Cantrell, a former SpaceX propulsion engineer, went on to found Phantom. So this is a real coming home story for a lot of the technology that he founded at a previous company. Whether it actually helps in the development of Daytona is yet to be seen. I find it hard to imagine that a company that he created didn't already bring over all the valuable assets and IP. But it seems like he's taking ownership of some of the things that could help out with their development. Having another launch vehicle available would be great. This Daytona system is a 2-stage modular rocket for small payloads. So hopefully that comes online soon. ISP Tech closed a 5.5 million euro seed round led by Join Capital to expand their manufacturing, complete critical infrastructure tests, and speed up the commercial rollout of their non-toxic ready-for-space propulsion. This is kind of in the same vein as Agile Space getting their funding last week. ISP Tech builds space-based propulsion. These are chemical bipropellant rockets that use nitrous oxide and ethane, which is what makes them non-toxic, since a lot of people use hypergolic kind of components that are difficult to
hydrazine and the like.
Yeah, that are difficult to handle on the ground, and just the overall risk of having a toxic chemical on board a rocket is not great for obvious reasons. So it's great to see some growth here. This is a European company, so building out some of their capabilities, such as agile space maneuverability, is great. It will be really critical as they pursue some of their RPO aspirations.
I'd be interested to see some of the performance ISP for their chemical combustion relative to some of the other domestic companies that I know are playing in a similar space, but are doing so with a different form of propellant.
So the failure of the propellant tank during testing for Rocket Lab back in January has now officially delayed the first launch of their Neutron rocket to at least the fourth quarter of 2026. This is unfortunate news. The Neutron is highly anticipated, I'm sure, amongst us and many others in the space industry. It is a larger lift capability rocket for Rocket Lab, including a reusable second stage, which would make it the first fully reusable rocket in operation. It's kind of been suspected that their launch would be set back due to this testing back in a month ago. And I think the timing is they were just waiting for the right timing to kind of announce this setback officially. They announced it during their fourth quarter earnings call, and announcing it alongside huge revenue earnings have certainly helped dampen the impact of this announcement. They've brought in $500 million in revenue last year. They're projected to bring in at least $1 billion in revenue this year, just off the back of that Tranche 3 PWSA win they got. So huge gains for Rocket Lab financially, especially the acquisitions and all that. But this is an unfortunate setback for them.
Yeah, I don't think that too many folks are going to be complaining over at Rocket Lab, given that they're at $500 million and on track to hit over $1 billion in revenue. Those are really important and really impressive milestones. The setback is a disappointment, but we're focused on stacking wins, not counting losses here. So these are some pretty big wins that they've got despite the setback, and they'll still get up this year. So it's all gravy.
Crossbow Systems, which I just found out is pronounced that way because I've been calling it Expo Systems for months now.
I've been calling them X-Wings for years, so I must have done something wrong.
I think there's a different company called X-Wing. Oh, it's the drone company.
Oh, that's right.
Expo, Crossbow. They announced they successfully tested their 34.5-inch Ballesta solid rocket motor. They first unveiled this motor in 2022, but with this test, they have now successfully scaled from their 2-inch diameter test rocket to now 30+ inches in diameter, which makes it fully operational and is able to join the likes of Northrop Grumman and L3 Harris in their solid rocket motor production for the U.S. Missile industry. We had mentioned them a few months ago, along with companies like Avio and Ursa Major, because they had gotten funding from Lockheed Martin and I believe Raytheon to develop their solid rocket motors in support of missile production scale up, which is happening at a huge scale. I know Avio just this past week announced that they're going to locate their U.S. Manufacturing hub in Virginia. They're spending $500 million on that hub to build out domestic capability of solid rocket motor production for missiles. So this is a great step for Crossbow. They'll finally be able to deliver on some of that investment. We should expect to see them bringing in some money now that they're at operational status. They just have to get to the production status next.
Yeah, I hear there may be an opening at Vulcan for solid rocket motor components. So there might be some reason for Crossbow and Avio to keep hitting that marketing hammer.
Yeah, in case the demand for missiles dries up.
This week, there's a multitude of different business moves and announcements that I get to run through. The first of which is that Charter Space has launched their own insurance brokerage, the Charter Interplanetary Risk Corporation. CIRC is focused on helping space companies secure coverage for their missions and underlying businesses, including their orbital assets. And Charter is a broker that specializes specifically in the space industry and orbital assets, covering all terrestrial insurance needs for a company's underlying operations and all aspects of the space assets from design through deorbit. Additionally, Rocket Lab has acquired Optical Support Incorporated. This is another rapid acquisition for Rocket Lab, who's continuing to roll up capabilities into their tech stack and moat. This acquisition is mostly focused on Earth observation and missile observation rather than it is the more explicit optical terminal play that we predicted later this year. But another rapid acquisition from Rocket Lab, and they are continuing to incorporate key suppliers into their moat.
Yeah, this will be a big one because every missile defense company needs optics. So having their own company that can make a similar play as they did with GOST with that Tranche 3 play where they got $800 million in direct funding for their satellites, but they're also able to pull in $200 million because everybody else in that contract was using the Starlight payload that was manufactured by GOST, but now manufactured by Rocket Lab. So I think they saw a playbook that paid off, and they're doing it again, and now with optics.
Seraphim Space out of the UK has exceeded their $100 million target for their latest early stage space tech venture fund. This is coming off the back of some massive investment from the UK national security and defense priorities. There's also some follow-on investment from some of their previous investors, but Seraphim is very much a part of the UK's space sovereignty priority and their willingness and desire to continue to invest and prioritize space and national security as commingled and correlated priorities. Back stateside, Intuitive Machines has announced a $175 million equity investment led by an unnamed, quote, global institutional investor. This money has raised a few eyebrows, and Lantera Space Systems and Intuitive Machines stock price has dipped by 6.1%. But the money will allow the moon-based company to invest in comms and data processing technology. Now, generally speaking, raising money is viewed by public markets as a negative signal. You need money that you don't have. That's never a good position to be. However, Intuitive Machines has roughly $350 million in total debt and a debt to equity ratio of negative 0.9. So what that means is that in aggregate, they have roughly 7% of their book as assets. So roughly they have roughly 7% of their total liabilities as their total assets, which is pretty big. That's a pretty big indicator there.
It's just bonkers how much money Cam Gafarian's continuing to raise. He raised like $350 million for Axiom last week, I think. So this is close to, I think it's over $500 million in fundraising within like a month between Intuitive Machines and Axiom. And I know X Energy got some funding late last year. What's the other one? Quantum Space. Haven't heard anything from them, but
yeah,
crazy amount of money.
Cam's doing a great job of raising capital. I mean, the fact that Intuitive Machines is already relatively highly leveraged and that they're able to raise more money on top of that is pretty impressive. Though part of me starts to empathize with our former colleagues at now Lantera Space Systems, because the last time this happened was when NDA bought Space Systems Loral in a deal that was probably a little bit overpriced and saw NDA over-leverage themselves before the market corrected, which led to difficult contraction for everyone involved. So hopefully Intuitive Machines isn't over-leveraged and isn't overplaying their hand in any capacity, and we're not repeating ourselves here, but it's been just about 10 years since that happened. So,
well, now you got to talk about the other half of Maxar.
Yeah, the lucrative half of Maxar, Vantor, has announced a follow-on contract with the U.S. Army worth up to $217 million. So they're doing great. This is to continue work on the service's One World Terrain program, designed to train and rehearse missions using a high-precision, immersive 3D terrain. So their promise is to deliver sub-3-meter resolution with detailed surface textures, leveraging their vivid 3D terrain platform and Forge backends to aggregate and synthesize data streams from both orbital and unmanned aerial vehicle assets. So they're using both drones and low Earth orbit, and I think in some cases more MEO and higher Earth orbit assets in order to inform the data model on the back end that will provide the intelligence to their end customer.
I think this really emphasizes the point that I know is made at Maxar quite often, which is that data makes money and satellites cost money. Like, this is the dichotomy manifested. So in tech advances this week, we have Lambda Vision, which manufactures artificial retinas in LEO, announced that they have pre-booked manufacturing time and space on board Starlab Space's yet to be launched commercial space station. So Lambda Vision, interesting in-orbit manufacturing company. Artificial retinas, they're growing proteins on orbit to create better retinas to replace failing ones on Earth. This company has raised funds a few months ago, and I find it one of the more interesting applications for in-space manufacturing. Having space on board of Starlab, to me, signals that they are moving more towards an operational state. Rather than launching on board dedicated spacecrafts, they're able to take some space on board of a space habitat. So this is much closer to what we see with ISS applications of in-space manufacturing, where you have a fully supported kind of manufacturing hub for whatever you're building in space. So really, really cool application. Hopefully Starlab goes up soon. I think it's projected to be up by the end of the year. Voyager's making some great progress on that. And hopefully Lambda Vision is able to operationalize and actually create value out of what they're building in space. HEO has partnered with UNSW Canberra Space to perform Australia's first rendezvous and proximity operations mission. This is supported by funding from Defense Trailblazer. So this is an interesting one, as HEO's launched a few satellites. They recently launched on Impulse Space along with Samara Space, who we had the pleasure of interviewing Patrick Haddix for a few weeks ago, as well as launching Zeno Astronautical's Super Torquer payload on there. HEO had other imagers that they've already demoed the ability to do non-Earth imaging with. They get some pretty high-res pictures of other satellites comparable to what we see come out of Vantor, who's another company that's very capable at this. But this is a pretty new application for their technology. Obviously, if they've already shown the ability to image other spacecraft, the next logical step to using that, aside from just space domain awareness, is actual space defense applications. So RPO, key technology, every nation's working hard at it. They're taking a pretty unique approach, which I'm really curious to see how it plays out. They're using their Continuum 1 satellite, which is actually not really their satellite. They recently bought it from Satellogic, and this was Satellogic's new Sat-34, which was already on orbit. So they actually bought a satellite that's already in orbit. So they didn't have any of the lead-up manufacturing production on any of that. They were able to just buy a whole satellite and repurpose it for their application. And it's got onboard propulsion, so they're able to use their sensors with the propulsion on the spacecraft to perform an actual proximity operation with a target. Endurosat announces a partnership with Airmo, the Germany and Luxembourg-based provider of high-precision greenhouse gas monitoring services, to launch an independent methane monitoring constellation in early 2027. This constellation will consist of 12-plus satellites, and Airmo is leveraging Endurosat's technology to rapidly develop a spacecraft platform for what they've traditionally used as airborne sensors. Endurosat's business is to do rapid design manufacturing of spacecraft. So this is a great application for that. Methane monitoring is a huge problem, and Airmo has great sensors for it. So getting those sensors up to space should help a lot with methane sequestration efforts. That's a wrap for this week's recap of the space industry. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, thank you to Jeffrey Hill, chairman of Satshow, for joining us and sharing a discount code to our listeners. Again, that's space012. As always, please drop us a comment, check out our socials, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're receiving the signal. Until next time, and until we hopefully see you at Satshow, this is Harrison Lambert and Paul Mayer signing off for now.